We're here at the Hermès Spring Summer 24 show, and there's quite a commotion outside. So we're gonna pop in, watch the show, and maybe come out with some notes. Hi!
So good to see you. Mwah.
So yeah, there we go. Paris Fashion Week, it's mayhem.
In an age where everything is so easily accessible through the internet, there are some experiences that you just cannot get by scrolling through a website or looking at a photograph. The feeling of visiting somewhere like Paris and interacting with the community on a personal level is incomparable to any online equivalent. On this season finale of Watches in the Wild, we'll explore the overlap between fashion and watches up close and personal through the lens of frequent visitors like myself and of local residents. I'll guide you through the Hermès ready-to-wear show, take you on a walk through a popular flea market to see some watches in the wild, see what I did there, and chat with some watch enthusiasts and collectors with roots in the fashion industry, including a familiar face from episode 1. And I hope that by the end of this episode, the connection between fashion and watches will become even more clear. Even if you've never been to a fashion show, you've probably seen a video of one, whether it was online or on television. But attending one in person is a remarkably different experience.
Chaos.
Despite the madness of it all, there's an awesome energy that I always feel when attending the shows. And as I ventured further into the venue, I noticed a strong appreciation for both fashion, of course, and watches too, all unified in one space. Hermès is known as a purveyor of luxury goods, so I'm not entirely surprised to see an overlap of the fashion and watch communities. In fact, it's more like an intersection between the two. And seeing these watches in person, not to mention the ready-to-wear collection, is so very satisfying.
You really see that DNA between the accessories, the kind of beautifully cut clothing, the beautiful fabric, the beautiful leather, and actually a lot of that stuff crosses over into their watches. So it's always fun to see the show and just kind of zoom out and see that bigger picture, the like full Hermès vision.
Seeing clothes and watches up close is one thing, but there's something special about feeling the weight and texture of an object in your hand or on your wrist. Which is why, after wrapping things up at Hermès, I decided to walk over to a popular spot where I knew I would be able to get some hands-on experience. This is the largest flea market in Paris, known as Le Marché aux Puces de Saint-Ouen. Thousands of vendors sell a wide variety of antiques here, from vintage furniture and fashion to, you guessed it, watches.
There's so much stuff everywhere.
So much stuff everywhere. But there is a small scene of vintage jewelry and watches.
This is Arthur, an experienced vintage watch dealer with an eye for style. I first discovered him on Instagram, where he showcases his collection of vintage watches, auction catalogues, and advertisements. Arthur is actually one of the first people I came across during my initial foray into the watch space, and as a frequent visitor to Paris, all the way from Luxembourg, he's the perfect guide for my journey through the flea market.
So do you come here a lot, or kind of special occasions?
I like to look around,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Inspiration?
See, exactly, inspiration. See what's out there.
Yeah.
And if you know how to talk, French helps.
Yeah. Faut parler en français.
Ouais, faut parler en français.
Okay.
But no, beautiful place, and it used to be a bit more active.
Yeah.
I think it's died down because of the internet and people, like young people like me and a lot of other folks who just, do it with Instagram, all the social media that we have now.
Yeah.
And, people don't like to move around as much as they used to,
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
They're not that curious anymore. A picture on the internet just seals the deal.
I mean, how does that work for you?
For me, it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy about it, but it's a bit sad as well because you don't get this magic and this inspiration. And it's also about falling in love with the piece, And here you can definitely fall in love with a lot of antiques.
Even though Instagram has basically taken over the watch market in the digital space, nothing beats seeing a watch in person. Speaking of which, Arthur brought along some very interesting pieces from his watch collection for me to look at and, of course, to try on.
Hang on. What's going on? Am I seeing double? What's happening?
So this one is mine. It's a reference 3584, and I bought it from a guy from New York around 2 years ago. And I just picked up this one from the first owner in Spain. And actually, if you can see here, the crown is different. So
A little small.
Exactly.
Little tough. They could be friendship bracelets.
Absolutely.
One for me, one for you.
Exactly. It's a really rare King Midas reference.
Yeah.
The bracelet is just so heavy.
It's a brick.
Yeah, and
It's really, and coming from someone who likes wearing a lot of jewelry, I'm not sure I could carry this.
Really?
It's really heavy.
It's really heavy.
Yeah. So let's talk about the dials here. Actually.
Yeah, the dial is lapis lazuli
Yeah,
dial.
because it's actually so interesting to put two of the same kind of references with the same stone, because you really see the difference.
You see the difference in the patina as well.
Yeah, yeah.
To me, it's one of the most perfect watches I know.
Yeah.
Just because of the aesthetics, it looks pretty perfect to me.
Arthur's appreciation for design is very apparent in his collection. He gravitates towards watches that are design-centric and very jewellery-like. But there was one watch that stood out to me from the rest, the one on his wrist. A modern Rolex OP with a yellow dial, which I would argue weirdly had the most personality of the bunch.
This is a modern watch. I wear a modern watch.
You just told me you're only into vintage.
I'm only into vintage, but this one is just perfect.
Yeah.
To me, I love yellow. I have a yellow car at home as well. So
you have
that's
a
why.
yellow car.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to me, it just made sense to have it, and I wanted to have a watch where I can just go out and
feel sort of at ease.
Yeah,
I think OP is like that universal kind of easy to wear.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
that
agree.
perfect
I wasn't a big fan
diameter.
before I saw this one, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. I went to the AD and he showed me, and I was like, wow, okay, this one is great.
What is it about stone dials and colorful dials that you're so into?
I couldn't say. It's just I like when things are a bit different, and just the whole movement of stone dials and dials with color always made sense. It's not just black and white. I'm just drawn to it.
What do you look for first in a watch? What are you most attracted to?
It's hard to see a watch. You have to put it on your wrist, right?
Yeah.
I think it's very important that even if I'm with friends and they look at my watches, I always tell them, put it on your wrist. Don't just look at it like this, because that's when you create the real connection between you and the watch, and it makes the whole difference basically. And I think that's what I do first. I just put it on my wrist, and that's why also I sometimes I have women watches that I wear. I love to wear women watches, and I think if it makes sense on my wrist, and if I love it, and if the history is there, the rarity is there, and the condition is there, then I
think it's less about size when it comes to watches, and more just about that perfect balance of the design on your own wrist.
Totally. And I think also as well, if I want to know the time, I'm just gonna look on my phone. I see watches as, of course, you can see the time with it, but to me, I see it as jewelry as well.
Yeah.
I put it in the same pot. You look at watches, but everything is connected, and the fashion is just part of it, And there is this huge gap between fashion and the watch world, and I think there is a huge opportunity in Paris as well. So that's why I'm here.
It's interesting to think that even in a place as fashion-forward as Paris, watch culture is actually just getting started. But in Le Marché aux Puces de Saint-Ouen, it's not hard to find traces of it, thanks to the shop owners here.
Bonjour.
Guillaume is an experienced watchmaker and founder of l'Atelier du Temps, a vintage watch shop that also offers restoration services.
Alors moi, je suis arrivé au marché aux puces, j'avais 19 ans.
Wow, ok.
C'était juste après mon école d'horlogerie et je sortais de chez Rolex. J'avais fait un partenariat avec la Marine nationale pour créer quelques protos.
Ouais.
Puis le monde des sociétés me plaisait pas trop. Et alors moi, j'ai eu une formation un petit peu sur tout ce qui était vintage par rapport à mon père qui était collectionneur de voitures anciennes.
Ah, cool.
Et en fait, quand je me suis baladé dans les puces, j'ai eu un crush pour cet endroit.
Ouais.
Et j'ai décidé d'ouvrir ma petite boutique à 19 ans. Donc j'avais 12 mètres carrés, je vendais des lips. Puis après, à force de vendre des lips, je vendais des Omega. Puis après des Rolex, puis maintenant des Patek et des choses un petit peu impressionnantes. Et donc voilà, par rapport à tout ça, donc j'ai évolué dans différents endroits dans les puces. Je suis le seul horloger à l'heure actuelle à proposer des vrais montres de collection et surtout avoir un atelier de restauration ici. Moi, j'aime bien sortir des montres qui, on va dire, ne valent pas excessivement cher.
Ouais.
Parce que je pense qu'il en faut pour tout le monde. Alors oui, on peut vendre des montres à 100 000 euros et des montres à 300 euros, mais j'aime bien aller chercher des trucs qui sont un peu hors marché. Et c'est un petit peu ce que tu vois ici. C'est des trucs justement qui n'ont pas encore popé et qui me plaisent, quoi, tout simplement.
Moi, pas encore popé, je sais pas.
Non, ça va monter plus cher, ça va monter plus cher.
Guillaume's inventory of watches is quite impressive, and it includes some interesting pieces that even I wasn't familiar with.
En fait, je connais pas cette marque.
Le Roi, si tu veux, en France, pour nous, c'est une marque qui est quand même relativement importante, car ça a été l'horloger du roi, l'horloger de l'empereur.
Ok.
Donc là, tu es véritablement dans les années 20.
Ouais, ah ben, ça se voit.
Et voilà.
Ouais.
Et en fait, moi, je suis amoureux des montres bijoux.
Ah ouais?
Des montres de balle, ouais, j'adore.
Ok.
J'adore.
Moi
Parce
aussi.
Quand tu regardes un petit peu le travail sur le bracelet, le travail d'emboîtage, le travail de sertissage, c'est juste
Oui, et le
diabolique.
bracelet aussi, c'est...
Et quand tu regardes le mouvement qu'il y a à l'intérieur, il est tout aussi sexy. Et pareil, c'est des montres qui sont un petit peu hors marché, qu'on rencontre jamais, qui sont pratiquement des productions artisanales, hein, parce que là-dessus, je sais même pas s'il y a eu 20 pièces de fabriquées sur ce modèle.
Waouh.
Et t'as vu l'histoire que ça raconte?
Ouais, mais on voit pas... Ah oui, le roi.
Le roi,
Ok.
le roi.
Ça me... reminds me of like a tank, a mini American.
Another unusual piece is this Hermes Kelly. And while it may not be the most practical watch out there, it certainly presents a unique take on design.
Alors là, tu es sur la vraie première génération de Kelly.
Ouais.
J'adore Hermès.
Ouais.
Je suis
Ah
kiff Hermès. Quand tu regardes, enfin voilà, je suis collectionneur de pas mal d'objets Hermès.
Ok.
Et si tu veux, Grace Kelly, c'est une femme de référence chez Hermès.
Ouais.
Et quand on voit un petit peu la frénésie qu'il y a autour de cette montre, qui est véritablement intemporelle, il faut quand même accepter de porter un cadenas au bout de ton poignet.
Ouais, c'est pas très
C'est pas très agréable.
Non.
Mais regarde, c'est cool.
Ouais,
c'est super cool.
From Art Deco and dive watches to historically significant pieces of French origin, l'Atelier du Temps has something to offer to both new and seasoned watch collectors. So this was given to the Pope in 1959 by Longines, and actually you can see there's sort of a light marking of the crest on the dial, and then you've got the enamel in the back. It's really well made. The bracelet's incredible too. Whether or not that's your bag, the provenance is pretty interesting, and it's just cool to find these little historical objects in the middle of Paris or just outside the périphérique in a typical traditional French watch store. After spending some time in Guillaume's shop, the two of us join Arthur and my friend Julien for another walk around the flea market. But this time, I was on the hunt for clothes.
Julien can be my personal shopper today.
Try this.
Yeah. Okay, I like this actually.
I love this.
Yeah. I think this could be cool. Oh my god. This dress is so cool. Okay, I found my pick of the day. We've got a long courage, orange sort of toweling fabric with the piping. It's like perfect French designer, 60s, mid-century. It's like, this is what I'm coming here for. This dress is iconic. Like a perfect find, like chef's kiss. This definitely feels like a separate part of what's been going on in Paris all week. It's kind of like going to markets, going to vintage fairs. That's where a lot of designers like find pieces to reference and use as source material. So it's always interesting to go and check out, the vintage flea markets and stores and stuff.
After some much needed retail therapy, Julien and I decided to sit down and have a chat.
Do we look like assholes with sunglasses?
I hope so.
Okay.
Honestly, I hope so.
Since he's a resident of Paris, I was curious to find out more about his experience as a watch dealer who interacts with the local watch community nearly every day. His career started in fashion, working at brands like Comme des Garçons and Visvim, but his interest in watches began more than 15 years ago.
Do you think your kind of background in fashion has influenced your approach to watches?
A lot actually, because I'm really into design. I'm always looking for something different or something unusual. I know that a lot of people in the watch industry are looking maybe for complication or big brands, stuff like that. I'm not really into this. I'm really into the design. So I don't care if it's a quartz movement, a simple movement, or something really complicated. I'm only looking for a design.
Okay, that's interesting, because I feel like that's kind of how I approach it too. But then sometimes I like to get swept up in the
of course.
horlogerie.
Of course. Everybody does. Sometimes I just need a feeling. I'm really thinking when I'm buying a watch, I'm thinking of the way I would dress with it.
Okay.
I'm still really into the fashion, so I'm still buying a lot of vintage clothes, stuff like that. And all the time I'm okay, which kind of watch can I put in this outfit?
Would you say your approach to collecting clothes is similar to how you choose watches, or?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I only buy things that I like. So even if at the end of the day I have to do my business, to earn my life, I'm only buying stuff that I really like and that I can that make me feel something.
Design is a big factor in Julien's collection, but a few of his watches also hold sentimental value, like this Bulgari.
So this one is pretty special to me. That's the watch that get me into watches. I was raised by my mom, and because I lost my father when I was really young, but we still have his friend around helping us, and one of his best friends used to have this watch. So I was all the time a bit obsessed about this watch, it's nice. I didn't know nothing about watches, but I knew that he has a Bulgari. And as soon as I earned a bit of money, I bought this watch. So I'm still wearing it almost every day.
Yeah.
This watch it's a bit tricky, because most of the people are it's the mauvais goût, bad taste. But I think that's the thing I love the most about these watches.
Yeah.
It's a bit too much, but it's way too much that it's cool. I don't know if I can say it.
Well,
but
I think it comes back to me saying how it's that thing of ugly beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, it's the
That's
balance.
definitely
You've got to find the balance, but sometimes something that's a little bit too much or a little bit tacky.
Yeah.
It kind of works.
Yeah. It works obviously with this one.
Yeah.
Also a special story about this one. So it's obviously full gold Datejust from 1986. And I bought this watch from the daughter of the first owner. And that's a funny story, because I was talking with her and she came with 2 watches, and she was like, okay, I've got a real one and a fake one. And
so she had, hang on a sec, she had a fake and a real.
She was like, I've got 2 watches for sale. One is real, and I think the other one is fake, so I'm not gonna te faire perdre du temps with this one.
I'm not gonna waste your time.
Yeah, exactly, with this one. I was like, okay, show me the real one. And she showed me a small Air King, and I was like, oh, that's a nice watch, I'm gonna buy it. And I was like, we are there, so please show me the other one. And she showed me this watch.
And she thought it was fake.
And she was like, yeah, it's fake, because it's belonged to my father. He never wear it. And as soon as I saw the watch, I was like, okay, so it's 100% real.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna buy it too. So that's a funny story.
Yeah.
And
so I bet you got a good deal on that.
not really
Okay.
in the end, because she was like, oh, okay, so it's gold. And I even told her that it's pretty rare because usually like the full gold watches like this are day dates.
Yeah, yeah.
And as this one is a Datejust, and I really like it because it's really simple. I told her like it's rarest to have like this kind of configuration.
I can definitely admire Julien's honesty there. And since he obviously meets all sorts of people here in Paris, I wanted to know what his thoughts were on the local community of collectors.
The whole point I'm here, I suppose, is to kind of show a different side to the collecting community and how, you know, there are lots of different people with different tastes. And what would you say are kind of the differences between people in fashion who collect and maybe just, you know, I guess the sort of more traditional watch collecting type?
There is many people in the fashion industry who collect watches, and they're gonna do it like a really different way as like the usual collector. So maybe like the classical collector gonna go for like a vintage Submariner or like a Daytona Speedmaster, because everybody is gonna tell you in the watch industry like, oh, you should have this watch in your collection. People from the fashion industry are not really like that. They're more like, okay, I want something really special, unusual, and I want something that when I have it on the wrist, people are gonna ask me like, oh, which brand is it? Where did you buy it? Like my clients, they don't really buy a brand.
Yeah.
They definitely buy a design.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I do think, obviously everybody's different, but I do think that people with a sensibility for design, they just want to wear the most unusual thing.
The thing that I understand sometimes, like the guys from the watch community gonna be looking like for a quantième perpétuel, something like really, high complication, horlogerie, stuff like that. It could happen into the fashion industry too, but like most of my clients tell me like, you know, I'm not gonna set the hour.
Set the time.
I don't care. I just want something that I can wear and looks cool.
Yeah. I want to know a little bit about your thoughts on kind of where the watch industry is headed and sort of the democratization of watches, and you know, maybe you don't come from a sort of super traditional watch background.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Like, where do you see the watch world heading?
So I think thanks to you, to Hodinkee, like many people get into watches, and now it's easier and easier to have like a nice design on your wrists. And especially the thing that I think for a long time people thought that to have a watch you have to have an expensive one. And now there is like many brands, even if you buy like a vintage watch, you can have like something really cool for a cheap price. Yeah. And people are getting more and more into those kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, you can buy like a G-Shock or a Seiko or anything for like a couple of $100, and the watch is really cool and it suits everybody. And the thing is not like to have like the most expensive watch on your wrist. It doesn't mean anything. It's not because it's really expensive that it suits you or it's cool.
You know, that's what I've noticed since being in Paris and going to events and shows, and a lot of people are wearing watches, but they're not necessarily wearing what you'd expect them to wear. They're kind of going at it from a different angle, and often those kinds of watches that are more design focused are maybe a little bit more affordable. Yeah. Okay, maybe not a crash, but
yeah.
But I see that like the way that the kind of young crowd here wear watches is about design, and it does kind of open up a different category that's often a little less expensive.
Definitely. And I think there is also something into the fashion industry is like people are taking care now of watches. They're like, okay, I've got a nice outfit, like everything is matching, but I need something else, and it's the watch.
Luckily, some watch brands seem to be moving in a more democratic direction in terms of affordability and availability. But what about in terms of sizing?
So we've got this mini sub, and this to me is kind of like, okay, I'm newly into Tudor as a brand.
Okay.
And I know there's a lot of talk about what size and what diameter works on men, women. I simply don't care.
Okay, me too. That's one of the watch I love the most.
Yeah.
It's not that small. It's 33 millimeters.
Yeah.
This one is from my birth year, 1992. And I really
love like the shape, everything. And usually, like most of the time when I'm wearing this watch, like people are like, oh, they didn't like notice the size. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's a top design. I
Yeah.
really like it. And when you remove it, they're like, oh, it's small. But that's the cool thing about this watch.
A mini sub is something I've always dreamed of.
Okay.
And I was like, oh wait, there are vintage mini subs from Tudor.
Yeah.
And it's just to have that kind of really sporty design in a smaller size, I think means a lot to me.
Yeah, and especially like I think like smaller design are coming back,
Yeah.
like small sizes,
Yeah.
especially for men.
What do you think about that? Because I feel like you probably just are like, whatever, take what you want, wear what you want.
Yeah, so I could even wear a Lady Datejust because I
Yeah.
really like the design
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm really into small watches. I understand totally the people that want something like bigger on their
Yeah.
wrist. But like for me, 33, it's perfect.
In the fashion community, it's a common shared thought that clothes have no gender. So it seems only natural that watches are starting to reflect that mindset too. And although a lot of us are primarily focused on style, we also like to read and learn about where things come from. We like a little context. Speaking of which, the next person I'm meeting is an important contributor in the editorial world of men's fashion and watches. He has his finger on the pulse of both.
I think fashion is always trying to move forward, and it's almost like the watch world is always trying not to move forward. At least in the way they do business and the way they sell to, particularly the way they sell to women or don't sell to women.
Yeah.
I think it is changing, but the pace of evolution is glacial compared to fashion.
Yeah.
But I think that's also why watches become something that's sort of reliable in a crazy fashion world.
Nick Sullivan is the creative director of Esquire, a global magazine covering a variety of topics including men's fashion, accessories, and watches. This week, Nick is here to focus on the fashion side of things, but like myself, he's also got his eye on what people are wearing on their wrists.
You told me as you came in that you'd noticed a lot of people at Fashion Week wearing watches.
Yeah, I mean, you always do. I think for most fashion people, it's kind of, it goes with the territory of your sort of lifestyle and it's part of your wardrobe. I think what's interesting is that being in the design world, these people sort of skew slightly more towards design-led watch brands and status watch brands. So in the normal world, let's say, there would be an equal spattering of kind of dressy watches and sports watches. But I've noticed a big uptick in dressier watches, which we know is happening in the watch industry, but it's interesting to see it in fashion too.
Do you think it's just more design driven?
It's just design driven. I think they go for more sort of pure aesthetics. And I think also, you know, you buy your clothes from a clothing brand, you buy your watches from a watch brand, ideally. And so I think people tend to go the same way they have their, you know, you're a fashion guy, you're kind of nuts about Saint Laurent, or you're crazy about Celine. You're going to find a watchmaker and you're going to tend to go for, that's a sort of classic moment. What's interesting is that people tend to go classic with the watch, but they'll wear it with a t-shirt and jeans, or they'll wear it with a sweatshirt. But most people these days in fashion are much more relaxed.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you hit that perfectly. It's like that high-low mix. I've been talking about it all week. It's like the tracksuit with the sort of Cartier dress watch or whatever. That's kind of what.
Yeah, and I think fashion people also know that if you wear a Louis Cartier tank, it's more noticeable because it's small than if it was big.
Yeah.
And it sort of draws you across the people see it across oh, I want to know what that is because I can't quite see it.
Yeah.
So much of fashion, if it's done right, it's got a lot more to it when you get up close to it.
Yeah, 100%.
Workmanship,
Yeah.
Ideas, weird things, but just cool things.
I think the same goes for watches. If you see a picture versus seeing it in real life and touching it and putting it on your wrist, it's a completely different experience.
Oh, totally.
However, Nick is no stranger to shopping online, and he has quite a diverse sense of taste in watches as a result.
I like weird vintage watches that cost nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a shopping list of
Hang
iconic
on,
watches.
you told me about this brand. What was it? It was like an English brand, and it was these really eccentric vintage.
Oh, it was the Old England.
Yeah.
Old England started off as this really funky kind of, about 18, 20 years before Swatch, they were making very Anglo-inspired, funky watches for the sort of late 60s hippie generation. So Twiggy wore them, the Beatles wore them. There's Mick Jagger on a plane, and he's got this, what looks like a sort of Cartier on steroids. And I looked at it, just looking at it, there's no way it could be a Cartier.
Yeah.
And I found the exact watch on eBay. I bought it, it was at $80. And,
Classic. Bargain.
And it works. It sounds like a tractor, but it's allegedly a Swiss movement, but I think it was
TBD.
assembled by cows rather than people. And I have quite a few watches, so I have to kind of force myself to rotate. I wear a Speedmaster quite regularly.
Yeah.
But I love a Unimatic. I love literally across the board. I don't care what price it is.
Yeah.
Where it comes from, who made it. I wear a Louis Cartier tank, which I love.
So you don't really have one sort of design sensibility that you veer towards?
No, I mean, if you think about it, personally, I suppose I'd lean more towards divers. But for work, I kind of see our breadth of what we're trying to do, trying to explain watches to our readers, is you can't have a kind of
point of view.
Well, you can have a point of view, but it's like we'd be shutting ourselves off from really some good, fun stories if we just said all we do is serious brands.
Yeah.
Nick makes a great point on how the mindset should be, not just in the editorial space, but among members of the watch community too. And it makes me think that maybe if legendary names in the watch business were more open to change, the communities they've built might be more welcoming of it too.
I mean, I think the watch world keeps a sort of certain distance from the fashion world because they see it as representing everything that the watch world does not want to represent. It's like your sort of frivolous cousin. They see themselves as custodians of a very hard-earned heritage if they're in the right company.
Yeah.
And if they're a new company, then it's open season. You can do what you like. But if you're an old company, you've really got to be mindful of it. Those of us who love watches, we know we don't actually need to wear a watch.
Yeah.
So we wear them for a reason.
Yeah.
And that reason is stylistic and it's emotional and you're engaged in owning a watch. So why is it that so many people are not interested in that as a moment, as a style moment? And that's something that really is the challenge really for watch brands to survive. Is you're going to have to try and reach out and find out how to reach out to a wider audience.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as someone who likes to write about sort of both worlds, I often get a bit put out when, sort of the watch crowd don't understand maybe necessarily what I'm doing. But I actually think a lot of it comes from the same place. It's just like another object, another thing that I'm excited about.
The way it comes from, it's design.
It's design.
For most people, there's tribes within all of that.
There's 100% there are tribes, and it's just sort of like, I guess you just go with what you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting to think people used to wear watches because they had to. Now you don't need that anymore. So why is it so many people still love to wear watches, and so many people, younger people, are you just see them bare armed, and it's like, to me, there's a question mark on every wrist. It's like, what's going on? Why haven't you got a watch? Whether it's a $20 swatch or something, or something nicer. And I think it's something that you only evolve into through an appreciation of design and style, and that kind of thing. And if you never get there, then you maybe never get to that kind of world.
I think we could all stand to be a bit more inclusive because both fashion and watches have a lot of fans with diverse points of view that are all worth hearing. Whether you're a fan of big watches or small watches, or you prefer to wear your dive watch with a suit, or in my case, your Serpenti with shorts and a t-shirt, our varied tastes as people are what make fashion and watches so incredibly fascinating. And if we can find a real balance between both worlds, like many of my friends here in Paris have done, I think both communities can only grow stronger in size and in culture, which can only be a good thing for the industries that we've become so passionate about.